Okay, I guess it's 7 o'clock, so let's begin. I apologize for the screen. I know it's a little bit fuzzy. I think that's, we worked on it for a bit, and I think that's about as good as we can get at this point. Before we begin, I just want to make an announcement that there are materials, the handout and the comment form in Spanish at the back table, and these materials will also be available online in Spanish. So I just want to make that announcement. So welcome everybody. I'm Dave Cutler. I'm a supervising engineer with the department. We're here for the public information meeting. This is the third one actually for State Project 167-108, to repair deficiencies at the Heroes Tunnel. For those of you not familiar with the Heroes Tunnel, it takes the Wilbur Cross Parkway through the West Rock Ridge in Woodbridge, New Haven, and Hamden. Like I said, today's meeting is the third in a series. We actually started with a public scoping meeting. That was mandated by the environmental document. We had that. We held that in September of 2016, a little over a year ago. Since then, we thought it was a pretty good idea to have a meeting in the other towns as well. So we held a meeting in New Haven in June, and here we are in Hamden. So hopefully some of you I've recognized from previous meetings, and I see a good turnout again. So even though it's the third one, we still have a good turnout. So these next couple of slides, I'm going to go through the introduction, then I'll hand it over to the consultant engineer. But for the first thing I'd like to do is just introduce some of the engineers and personnel assigned to this project and point them out if they are here tonight, if I can find them. The first one is Ted Nazamus. I was just talking to Ted. Ted's in the back. Ted's the manager of bridges, so he's the big cheese here. Tim Fields is a principal engineer. He wasn't able to make it today. Like I said, I'm Dave Cutler. I'm a supervising engineer, aka project manager, and I work in the Bridge Consultant Design Unit, which is the liaison unit for the department that we oversee projects that are designed by consulting engineers. Not here tonight is Derek Lassard. He's the project engineer. He's the workhorse for our unit. He wasn't able to make it tonight. We also have some people here from the Office of Environmental Planning. There's substantial environmental issues with this project. So we have, Kevin Fleming is assigned. I don't think Kevin's here tonight. Amanda Saul is here representing OEP. Chris Samarazic, is he here? Is also assigned, and Scott Spiel, who is not here as well. But they are actively working on this project for us on the environmental side. For those of you who came who wanted to know more about the Interchange 59 project, we do have two engineers from the state here. We have Scott Bushy in the back and Ed Saborin in the back as well that will be glad to take your questions on the Interchange 59 project. We also have, since we have federal money in the design and we're anticipated to have federal money in the construction phase, we have representative from FHWA. We have Chris Hansen in the back, and Tim Snyder is actually the area engineer, but he wasn't able to make it tonight. So the consultant that has been retained by the department to design, they did the initial inspection and prepared a preliminary study report. They're also going to be doing the NEPA document, the preliminary design, and the final design, is CDM Smith. And from CDM Smith, we have Mike Egan, who is the project manager, Becca Hall, who is the public engagement specialist. Dave Sousa is here someplace. Dave's right here. He's a planner. Muhammad isn't here, but Mahmoud is here to take his place to answer questions on the specifics of the tunnel. And that is it for CDM Smith. Okay, so this is a plan view or an overhead view of the project limits. As you can see, the tunnel takes up about 1,200 feet of it, and there's 2,000 feet on either side, so essentially a mile of project limits. You can see the tunnel goes through the West Rock Ridge. On top of the ridge is the State Park. To the north is the Nature Center. We have Wintergreen Avenue and Wintergreen Brook to the north, and West River and Interchange 59 to the south. Here's an aerial view of the same area, just showing. It's just an aerial photo, and it also has an inset of a view looking south on Route 15. So why are we here? What's the purpose and need? The purpose is to correct existing deficiencies of the tunnel, to enhance safety, to improve travel, and to ease maintenance. And the need is to address the existing structural, mechanical, and electrical deficiencies, and also improve the geometry and safety, and to reduce the need for maintenance, improve reliability, and extend the service life. So that's why we're here. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Mike Egan from CDM Smith, and he's going to describe the project in greater detail. Mike?
Thanks, Dave, and hello, everyone. Well, first, the tunnel description. The Heroes Tunnel, originally formerly named the West Rock Tunnel, was opened in 1949 as part of the Wilbur-Cross Parkway, and it is eligible for listing on the state and national historic register. It's the only highway tunnel through a natural landmass in Connecticut, and it is a key connection to cross-state travel, carrying 77,000 vehicles per day in the 1,200 feet long twin barrels of the tunnel. The existing conditions. Well, presently the tunnel is non-compliant for current tunnel standards and requirements concerning its geometrics, its ventilation and emergency systems. On its geometrics, each barrel has 11-foot lanes, 6-inch shoulders, really almost non-existent shoulders, and 26-inch raised walkways, as you can see. Oh, sorry. All right. Here you see right there. Again, it's a little bit hard to see, but basically the little concrete raised walkways on the side of the shoulders. For this type of roadway classification, the standards call for 12-foot lanes with an 8-foot left shoulder and a 10-foot right shoulder. So you can see the deficiencies associated with the existing tunnel as far as its width. Now that is causing issues as far as emergency response constraint. Again, there is no shoulder. So if there's any issues, any accidents in the tunnel, you really can't get around that. Also, that limited width is causing issues as far as the peak hour congestion and causing recurring bottlenecks at those hours. The existing condition of the tunnel itself is presently in poor condition. That's as determined in the Connecticut Department of Transportation's inspection reports that the DOT is doing on a yearly basis. That was also determined in CDM Smith's 2009 inspection and study that looked at the existing conditions and potential repair options to address those conditions. Now, though it is in a poor condition, it's not presently a serious safety issue. Because again, it is inspected on a yearly basis, and the department makes sure the fact that any issues that they find are addressed to make sure it's not a safety issue. Now, what's causing this poor condition? For the most part, it's the groundwater infiltration that's coming from the ridge, all right? Groundwater that's actually in the ridge, and it's getting behind the existing tunnel liner, the concrete liner that's actually forming the walls and the ceiling, all right? That water that's actually getting in there and getting behind there, it's actually infiltrating through the concrete. It's in some situations it has actually caused some of the lime in the concrete to actually leach out, causing stalactites that you'd actually see in some situations in a cave. Also, the freeze-thaw conditions, because of that, is causing some of the spalling during the wintertime of the concrete, and also contributing to some icicles that are actually forming from the ceiling and from some of the walls because of the water that's actually leaching through. Now, these conditions have caused has required frequent maintenance and also resulted in frequent closures, and as well as shifting traffic to address those concerns. Now let's take a look at, again, just some closer look at some of the issues. Again, like Dave said, it's not very clear here. We do have some other pictures of some of the existing conditions on our boards over there, but what you can see is, again, you're seeing some evidence of some of the leakage here. You're seeing some of the efflorescence in the walls here. You're seeing some spalls. This is evidence of map cracking. I think you also see in this photo some exposed rebar. All of this is signs of the deterioration in that concrete liner. Again, and what we're also seeing is the fact that the deterioration is somewhat linear. It's actually getting worse each year, but it is something that is addressed by the department as they actually see some of these areas. Eventually, they try to go out, remove some of that concrete and actually patch some of those spalls, but it's continuing to get worse on a yearly basis. Now, this is a shot of the looking down the tunnel, looking at some of the tunnel ceilings. What you're seeing here is some of the spalls in the tunnel ceilings here. And again, this is actually a maintenance vehicle. It's actually the gentleman's doing some inspection of that tunnel liner. He's looking at that and making sure the fact that, again, that's one of the things that the department does on a yearly basis. You're going in there, you're sounding the concrete, you're making sure the fact that any of that loose concrete is found and determined where it is, and eventually that gets removed. But again, that's one of the issues that's part of the actual inspection process. Now, this is an existing cross-section of the tunnel. What we see here is this is the actual tunnel liner. Again, this is looking down the tunnel. So this is one lane here, the other lane. These are those raised concrete sidewalks we talked about. And this is the concrete liner here. This is the actual stone of the tunnel that has been cored out. What you also see, you see the steel framing here that's part of that tunnel liner. We're going to show another picture later on the next slide, but that steel framing strengthens the tunnel liner, but it also was used as a temporary support when they were actually digging out the existing tunnel. All right. But what's happening is, again, as water gets back here, gets trapped back here, all right, it's causing issues with the concrete liner of the ceiling and the walls. Now, this is the steel framing. This is a shot from the original construction. As you see, this is the steel framing that they used to support the roof of the tunnel and also the walls of the tunnel. Eventually, after the tunnel was completely bored out, this gets filled with the concrete, reinforced concrete liner that forms the concrete lining of the tunnel. And again, the steel supported it and also strengthens that liner. And as Dave said, we did, CDM Smith did an original inspection in 2009, where we did a study looking at different repair options. We followed that up in 2014 with an alternative construction options study and a supplement to that, which was done in 2016. Now, that identified the needs and deficiencies of the existing tunnel and also looked at reconstruction and rehabilitation alternatives to address those needs. Now, each one of those alternatives was looked at for several criteria that it was evaluated on. That included construction methods, construction duration, construction schedule or staging, cost, traffic impacts, construction complexity, and in the anticipated useful life. Now, what we've shown is a graphic representation, we also have it on a board back here, of some of the reconstruction options that we looked at in these studies. Again, we also color-coded it. Orange is rehabilitation, if you're rehabilitating a portion. This, in yellow, it's new construction, kind of hard to see, but green, it's temporary, and blue is abandoned. So what we're looking at for most of these reconstruction options, we're looking at the construction of a new bypass tunnel, either on a permanent basis or a temporary basis, all right? And then either rehabilitating the existing tunnels or reconstructing the existing tunnels. Again, the idea behind the new tunnel is the fact that you can divert traffic into the new tunnel while you're working, and then once you're finished that, you divert traffic in that, and then you start working on one of the existing tunnels. All right. We do have one option that we did look at, which, again, this was enlarging the existing barrels while maintaining traffic using a protective shield. It's a technology that is used in some locations in Europe, mostly for rail tunnels. But again, it's something that we took a look at it, but it's a situation where the complexity, risk, and the traffic impacts were pretty dramatic, but it's something that we did look at in the report. Now this gives an idea of what the cross-section of the new tunnel would look like. This is for a 2-lane tunnel. Again, you have the two 12-foot lanes. You have the 8-foot right shoulder, the 10-foot left shoulder. What we see here is the new concrete liner. Again, it's a much wider tunnel. What we're showing here is a lattice girder. It's a new type of construction for tunnels. And also the rock bolts. Again, you'd be looking at strengthening the rock adjacent to the tunnel using the rock bolts. And also the emergency ventilation, jet fans, a possible use of a possible ventilation system for the emergency ventilation. For the rehabilitation options, we did look at 2 rehabilitation options. Again, both of which, the difference between the two was one, we would shut down one barrel completely and divert traffic into, again, making one barrel accommodate both northbound and southbound traffic. The other option would be to do it on a basically off-peak hours. You'd still divert traffic into one barrel, but you'd actually do it during off-peak hours, and then you'd actually put traffic back into that when it was during the non-off-peak hours. Again, that would obviously lengthen the construction duration, and that was an issue. But what we found was this very, very significant traffic impacts during those lane closures. Significant traffic impacts associated with that. Also, the geometrics that we talked about that was an issue cannot be addressed when you're just simply rehabilitating the existing. Again, in fact, I'll show you a next slide. You can see the fact that you even get a little bit more constrained as far as the width during some of these options. But the structural integrity of the tunnels can be addressed with these options, and we found ways and methods to address the groundwater infiltration. In fact, this is a shot of again, a cross-section of what our rehabilitated tunnel barrel would look like. And this is the existing concrete liner that we talked about previously. You saw the slides of that. What we would do is we would drill into the rock with these, essentially a drainage hole. And then after you patch the existing concrete liner, you'd actually you'd be placing a waterproof membrane between that and the new concrete liner. That would be able to divert water so it's actually not impacting the new liner, and the new liner could be created so that it could take all, either part or all of the loads associated with the tunnel. But as you can see, this was the 2-foot, 6-inch little safety walks you had there previously. Again, now you're making this thing even narrower. even further impacting the narrowness of the tunnel and its width. And with that, I'm going to pass it on to Rebecca so she can talk about the environmental documentation.
Thanks, Mike. The National Environmental Policy Act and the Connecticut Environmental Policy Act are the formal policies that we are required to follow. It's a very strict procedure in order to select a preferred alternative for the tunnel. The first step is to establish the purpose and need statement, and that's where we are now, right in the very beginning. After that, we go through alternative analysis. You evaluate the potential alternatives for the environmental impacts as well as mitigation for those impacts. And then throughout that entire process, you have public outreach, which is what we are doing here tonight. And at the end of the NEPA and SEPA process, there is a preferred alternative. And again, as part of the NEPA and SEPA process, we prepare the environmental assessment and the environmental impact evaluation. So we're establishing that purpose and need that Dave read earlier. We're conducting field studies, so that's endangered species, historical, and an overall survey of the conditions, evaluating the alternatives, which Mike just went over on the board, and considering construction impacts and post-construction impacts and what mitigation will be required. So as part of this, we are looking at sensitive resources. So we're consulting with state agencies, environmental partners, property owners, special interest groups, and the public. We're looking at the air and water quality, groundwater, wetlands, historic and cultural resources, recreational resources, natural communities, threatened and endangered species, the aesthetics, the traffic, and the noise. So already identified in the area is Wintergreen Brook, West River, the West Rock Nature Center, and West Rock Ridge State Park. This is a preliminary map of some of the sensitive environmental resources. So you can see Wintergreen Brook up here, and you can see the floodplain that surrounds it. And then you can see on part of West Rock Ridge State Park, it's identified by the Connecticut DEEP as a unique habitat. And on to public involvement. So as part of public involvement, we will identify and engage key stakeholders to get their opinion on specific instances. We have established a project website. I don't know if anybody's had a chance to see it yet, but it went live on Friday. So it's heroestunnelproject.com. I encourage you to check it out. There's information on the project, there's information on the history of the tunnel, and then there's a comment and subscribe section where you can register your email, you can provide comments, but in registering your email, it keeps you informed of other events and other meetings that will be ongoing. And it provides you with our e-blasts, so you'll get any newsletters and any action that we're having. And then the meeting process of the public involvement. So right now we have a formal public information meeting. However, there will also be outreach events such as pop-ups where we come to you, whether it's, your senior center for a meeting or it's a farmer's market that you guys have locally. We come to you and it's a little more informal, so you can ask us the questions you have. It's not a formal presentation. We'll be having focus groups and then more formal public information meetings. And identified up here is a sample of stakeholders. I just want to mention that it's not all encompassing. There are others that are not listed up here, but what it is it's a sample. So it's the employers, the nonprofit organizations, the municipalities, key property owners or environmental interest groups, government organizations, transportation providers, people who we know are interested in the project. And we get these names by people emailing us directly, people sending the state emails, or registering again on our website. And with that, I will turn it back over to Mike to talk about the project's next steps.
Thanks, Rebecca. The next steps, well, first, this spring, we are looking at doing some geotechnical exploration. That will result in some nighttime traffic crossovers and a single lane of traffic in each direction. And we're doing some we're doing some of that geotechnical exploration from the existing tunnel, looking at some of the samples of the rock through, we're actually coring through the existing tunnel to get some of that information. We are looking at the next 6 to 9 months, some of the early field work. Again, some of the work has been completed. The topographical survey has been done, and the endangered species, at least the field work has been done. The report, I think, is still outstanding. And the archaeological survey is actually, I believe that's actually started. And the NEPA-SEPA document and studies that Rebecca went into, that's going to be going on for the next approximately 18 months. Again, looking at the alternative analysis, the environmental assessments, and the environmental impact evaluation. And the preliminary design will be following that after the NEPA-SEPA process, which will be advancing the preferred alternative that the NEPA-SEPA process has determined. And presently, we're looking at possibly, again, this is the potential timeline. This is construction. We're approximately here. Okay, looking at right now, spring of 20. Yeah. Yeah, what we're now looking at fall of 2018, draft NEPA-SEPA. Spring of 2019, acceptance of the NEPA-SEPA document. Spring of 2020, the preliminary design completion. And then we're looking at spring of 2022, construction is slated to begin presently. That really depends. That depends on the alternative that is actually selected. Some of the alternatives, like we said, some alternatives will actually take longer to construct than others. All right? And with that, we'll pass it back out to Dave.
All right. Thank you, Mike and Becca. And so at this point in the meeting, I'd like to open it up to questions and comments.
Given the previous statement about timeline, what's the outside, minimum and maximum for this project? Is it 2022 for you to start? Did I get that right? Actual whatever. So do you have an idea that it's a 5-year project if we're building tunnels, or is there any follow-on answer?
Yeah, our anticipated construction timeframe, if we do bore another tunnel, is probably about 5 years. So it would be 2022 through 2026. Sounds like a long way away now, but it sneaks up on you. Yes, sir.
Thanks for putting this on this evening. I've driven the Parkway and the tunnel for about 28 years, from Hamden to Bridgeport every day. As traffic started to get worse, I'd leave in the morning, maybe about 5:30. Fantastic driving, nobody's around. Coming northbound has always been the issue. You come down the hill in Woodbridge, exit 59 is not too bad, but people panic. They stop dead at the tunnel, and it seems, regardless of the time of day, yes, rush hour is an issue, but 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it stopped dead. People are afraid. And I hear what you're saying, possibly about widening it. I don't know if that would improve the traffic flow, but that would be my major concern on the whole thing. I could understand your structural aspects that you're looking at, but the traffic flow really, really bothers me. It wasn't that bad 28 years ago. It's terrible today, any time of day. So, somewhere along the line, keep that in mind as you're going forward. The other issue I want to bring up doesn't deal with the tunnel per se, but when you travel northbound on a fall afternoon, sun glare is terrible. And that'll stop everybody from going into the tunnel as well because they can't see. I don't know if there's any type of mitigation measure that you might have to help that aspect of it. So again, coming southbound, you got issues, people panic. Northbound in the fall, people can't see. So, thank
When
you.
you go southbound in the fall when the sun is setting, it's between 4 and 5 o'clock, you can't see either.
Yeah. So, Again, there's current concerns that are there. I don't know if widening it is really going to solve it, and I got 2 pages of comments that I'll leave for you. Too.
Okay, that's fine. And we have heard that comment before about people panicking or slowing down just because it is a constricted space. And I think we anticipate that if we did widen it, that would help the situation. And that's our hope anyway. We get that question a lot. That's the most common question that we get through emails and through these forums. Could we? I guess. It's something that we looked at in a cursory way, and we'll keep looking at it as part of the NEPA process. I kind of doubt it's going to go anywhere just because of the environmental aspects of, you've got a state park on a ridge, you've got a huge amount of rock. You've got traffic concerns that really wouldn't be addressed by just removing and making it an open cut. And I guess one of the major driving forces behind our alternatives is trying to maintain traffic in a reasonable way. And by taking out the ridge itself would probably be the worst as far as traffic implications. But we have looked at it, and we're going to look at it again, but I'm not anticipating that's going to go too far.
I'm a safety professional. I also drive that road every day. I'm 66 years old and driving through it for 50 years. And what I've noticed is lately is that part of the problem with the traffic slowing down is a lot of cars these days have headlights that will go on and off with light and dark. So what I've noticed is as people go through that tunnel, they get about 3/4 of the way through and their headlights go on, and the people behind them think it's brake lights. And that cascades down and people are slowing down. And something that I noticed probably 10 years ago, there were lighting improvements in the tunnel. And here's what I'm getting at. When you're driving through that tunnel at night, it's like sunlight. All of a sudden, your eyes are accustomed to the dark, and then all of a sudden it's daylight. In the daytime, exactly the opposite happens. You're driving along in daylight, and the tunnel is dark. Now, 10 years ago, there were some modifications made to those lights that did exactly the opposite. You drive through in the daytime, and the interior lighting was very bright. You didn't have to adjust your eyes. You drive through the night, and it was very dim. Again, you didn't have to adjust your eyes. And then about 5 years ago, there was another change made to it, and it went back to the original. And I think that contributes a lot to the traffic problem. As I say, people get through about 3/4 of the way, and that's where the traffic stops. And I've seen days where you're doing 20 miles an hour through that tunnel. There's no need for it.
Okay, your comments make sense. Mike, have you looked at the lighting on this? Yeah.
Actually, the department is actually having us taking a look at with some of our professionals, our electrical professionals and our mechanical professionals and our lighting specialists at the existing tunnel right now. So we are looking at some of those issues. In some of our correspondence and feedback from the department, they did state the fact that I think it's a little bit longer, I think when they actually did some of those repairs was a little bit farther back than you're recalling, because as far as the lighting was concerned, they did exactly that. The lighting is supposed to be brighter during the day than at night. That was the original design. Unfortunately, because of the conditions associated with the tunnel and the conditions associated with some of the electrical, some of those systems have started to fail. All right? That's the problem. Again, and now it has reverted. When you're saying it's reverted back, well, no one flicked a switch. It's just the fact that because of some of those systems are no longer acting like the way they were, and a lot of it is because of They tried to upgrade those electrical systems. They did work for a while, but because of the rest of the conditions in the tunnel, it's starting to affect that. And again, some of those have failed. What we're looking at doing is trying to address those, even in the existing condition. So making sure the fact that when we go forward and do this project, that even the existing tunnel is, during the construction phase, is going to be upgraded a little bit, even under the present conditions, so that it could be safe during the construction phases. Again, I think that could go a long way towards addressing just that. And again, there's a whole specialty as far as the tunnel lighting. There's a whole specialists who deal with that, because it's and to deal with just exactly what you're saying. Because again, it's not just turn on a light. It's just really varying it, and also making sure the fact that as you come into the portals, there's also systems which will vary the light as you're progressing through the tunnel. Again, I'm not a lighting expert. I'm a structural guy, but that's what I see with some of that. Dave?
I didn't hear that, excuse me? I didn't. No. Just looking at the constraints of the grade and the nature of the land that you'd be traversing, probably wouldn't hold a lot of promise as a viable alternative. I can't hear. I'm sorry, I just can't hear what you're saying. Okay, I'm not sure how similar it is, but no, to answer your question, we have not looked at that. Yes, sir.
How about the possibility of removing the tunnels as they are, all three, the two, and enlarging that with obviously a very large structure as a roof over over two larger tunnels?
Yeah, that's been discussed. Mike or Mahmood?
Again,
Strengthen the roof over the two tunnels, making them wider to support the rock structure, and making 3 lanes each.
so you're almost. So essentially, what you're saying is, when you're strengthening the existing tunnels, you're actually widening to the existing, right? Again, one of the things, when we look at some of the alternatives we are looking at, we are looking at actually widening and strengthening those existing tunnels, all right? Creating newer tunnels by doing that. The problem is, though, the process. How do you do that when you're trying to maintain traffic? Because the idea is to try to maintain traffic, even the rehabilitation, when you're just basically rehabilitating and forming a new liner, right? You still have to divert traffic, all right? Either partially or, full time. Those are the two rehabilitation options. We did look at some innovative ways to do just what you're saying. That's probably the alternative, where we talk about doing the protective shield. Because the idea is this: we still, to try to actually keep traffic going through it, because that's really the big concern. How do you do this and still maintain traffic while you're doing this construction? So we actually looked at some of the systems in Europe that actually will have a protective shield. You're almost forming a protective shield over the top of it. Well, those protective shields reduce traffic to essentially one lane. So you're still in the same kind of a situation. One of the barrels would still be one lane. The construction complexities would be huge, and the safety issues are associated with that type of construction method, which is very, very seldom, I don't know if it's ever been used in the United States, was it definitely concerned at the Department of Transportation. But we did look at it, all right? Again, this is a very, like we said, some of these issues, when one alternative may address one of our concerns, but then something else comes up, like the traffic, all right?
Wouldn't it also eliminate those roofs that you have now? in the tunnels?
Well, again, what we,
Seems to be all problem.
well, eventually you're going to have some kind of a roof. Eventually, what you're going to have some type of a, and again, we can actually,
Let
maybe.
me address your thought. So what I'm understanding is you'd like to take the two barrels and make it into a single large barrel. Is that right? So there are some, it's possible, but generally that's not done in tunnels where two-way traffic is in a single barrel. There are some fire and life safety issue concerns. So there are some fire and life safety concern issues, because generally when you have two barrels, the separation provides you with an opportunity, if there's an incident in one of the barrels, that there's an evacuation route. So in this case, the tunnel is approximately 1,200 feet long. The code requirements now require evacuation route every 500 feet or 600 feet, so you need to have some sort of means of egress. Given that the ridge is several hundred feet deep, getting an escape route would be difficult vertically. So an alternative could be that the second barrel, which would be separated, would be your escape route. So there are reasons why you wouldn't want to converge the two barrels into a single barrel. There are also complexities. The larger you make the tunnel, the more complex it becomes, the more difficult it becomes. So there are lots of different factors that go into making a decision like this. And typically, there are some tunnels where you have two-way traffic, but typically you don't have opposing traffic in a tunnel.
Someone else over here? Yes, sir, you in the front.
Apologize for coming in late and may have already gone over this, but is the proposed third northbound tunnel that you're going to create, is that going to accommodate 3 lanes of traffic that will pick up the on-ramp, the exit 59 on-ramp, and bring it through the tunnel so that it merge the other side of the tunnel, the one through?
Right.
I mean, I asked that question because I've driven through this tunnel for 31 years, twice a day. And it seems to me the backup northbound most nights and Fridays, particularly, is to some extent because of the merging on-ramp right at the tunnel. And nobody has any place to go. And the merge backs up all the way to Milford sometimes. I'm just thinking if you have a third tunnel, why not put 3 lanes through that and put the merge on the outside so you're not merging inside the tunnel? Because I think people psychologically have a difficult time changing lane, would have trouble changing lanes inside the tunnel.
As far as our alignments are concerned, for the new barrel, we did look at some of those, but they don't extend as far back to pick up all the way back to exit 59. We also looked at some of the alternatives alignments, and some of the alignments we were trying to do is also not impact some of the existing facilities, especially the nature center to the north and some of the facilities to the south. So some of those, when we looked at some of our initial alignments, again, there's very early stages of that, but when we looked at some of those to come up with some of their initial options, we were trying to avoid some of the impacts, some of the environmental impacts, and some of the historic impacts associated with an alignment like that. So that's another problem as well. We're trying to make sure the fact that we address some of the concerns as far as the, some of the traffic concerns with those alignments with the new barrel, but also making sure the fact that we don't impact some of the environmental situations, especially the West Rock Nature Center to the north. So trying to weave our way through that and also looking at minimizing some of the right-of-way impacts as well.
So it's 2 lane, the new tube will have 2 lanes. Is that?
Right now, that as far as the, we've looked at tunnel widths that could accommodate potentially 3 lanes. But right now, what we're looking at is a 2-lane tunnel. But as far as the capacity, that could change as far as in the final design phases.
I realize they have to merge
Right.
somewhere, and it backs up, any merge backs up, but it just seems like that's part of the problem.
Well, actually, to be honest with you, that's hopefully you have a comment that you can actually leave either in the comment section or in the or on the website, as Rebecca and Dave said, because again, that's a very insightful comment there, and it's something that definitely would be something that we delve into during this process. Thank you.
And I'd just like to add that if we did go with a new barrel, we would make it, even if it was striped for 2 lanes, we would make it large enough where we could stripe it for 3 in the future. So, yes.
I also had the thought about going over, but only in a temporary sense, instead of 5 years drilling a hole through. I'm thinking of the new exit to exit 47 downtown, it's like this, right? Somehow having a temporary road going over, isn't that less money and less time consuming than drilling a hole through a barrel and then abandoning it? I also had that over the top idea in the temporary sense.
Okay, let me see if, Mike, do you have a response for that? Did you look at going over? I don't recall that being looked at in any great detail.
Again, that's not something that was looked at originally. I think the problem is there's certain limitations as far as the grades are concerned that as far as especially on a road like this. And now also you have to realize the fact that you do have you do have exit 59. You do have traffic coming in onto and off of the road. All right, so you have to accommodate that unless you completely shut that down. And then when you start to look at, again, when you're looking at, 5 to maybe 10% grades is a pretty steep grade. Sometimes when you're driving around, you see those, steep grade 8%, right? Well, 8% is what? 8 feet, 8 feet up in 100 feet. All right, we're looking at a situation where we have to go at the top of the tunnels. It's about 200 some odd feet above the existing roadway. So again, you're looking at a situation where, again, and you have to ramp up to that. So that would take you way back, and now you're actually having something like that may have more impacts as far as not only right-of-way impacts, also impacts to traffic, because again, now you're looking at a situation where, what are you going to do with exit, the on ramps, your off ramps, as well as, as well as some of the, even on the north side with Wintergreen Avenue. Now you'd be looking at a situation where now you have to span over that with a temporary bridge as well. So again, it just gets complicated. You could almost do anything if you really wanted to, but the question is, what's the best solution which is going to have the least impacts to some of those situations, the least impacts to the existing traffic, least impacts to right-of-way, and making sure the fact that also cost. You know, again, usually a situation like that, when you ramp it up, even on a temporary basis, the best way to do that is with earth, you know, a fill type situation, even on a temporary basis. And to do that, now you start to spread it out to the thing. So again, it's not like it's not possible, it just may not be practical, that's all. That's a good question.
I guess it hasn't been decided yet if we were to abandon one, what would it be used for? I'm sure there'd be plenty of suggestions. Yes, sir.
You mentioned there's a 59, exit 59 project.
Yes.
Can you just fill us in exactly what that is?
Well, there's actually two, and I don't want to go too far into it, but there's a project that is going to, short term, that I believe is scheduled for construction soon, maybe next year. And then there's another longer term project in the planning stages that won't be in construction for a few years yet. If you'd like to know more about the specifics, Scott and Ed are in the back, and they'll be more than happy to fill you in on that. Over in the corner.
Just 2 quick questions. Just 2 quick questions. Number one, is there any thought to easing the buses and tractor trailers that get on the Merritt? Because at least every other week, whether it's a physical barrier on the entrance ramps or something, because a lot of the delays at the tunnel, there's a bus sitting on the side of the tunnel waiting for a cop to come back out. I've also seen trucks having to go down the middle of the tunnel because they think they're too tall.
Yeah, it was funny because when the governor spoke out there in the summer, we were setting up and a tractor trailer drove by at about 5 miles an hour right through the middle of it. So I don't know. I'm not aware of any ongoing program to stop these overheight vehicles from entering.
Again, that's something that the department will be looking at on an overall basis. I know one of the projects that I worked on in the past was on the Hutchinson River Parkway, which is in New York. And again, in New York, because of the parkway systems and because of the whole mismatch of parkways and expressways, that's a big issue in New York State, as far as in some of the, especially around the city. And some of the things that they do, they'll actually have those actual physical barriers, so that will stop a truck before it actually hits the under clearance facility. But I'm not sure if the Department of Transportation has those kinds of facilities on the parkway.
Everyone ignores the signs that are at the entrance saying there's no RVs, trailers, that list. Yeah. The other question I had was in the diagram that you had for the rehabilitated tunnels, you mentioned that the very narrow sidewalks, those would actually disappear. I drive a small car and it feels tight already. So I would be really concerned that it would make traffic way worse if the rehabilitation was the only thing that you did, or even if 2 of the tunnels and you had a third, it would still make those tunnels even worse from my viewpoint.
So you're saying that if we rehabilitated the existing tunnel and just added to the liner and got rid of those sidewalks per se, that would make traffic slower? Yeah, we agree. Yeah. That is a definite issue and in a negative of that whole scenario, obviously. Yes.
Assuming that the choice is to renovate completely the 2 existing tunnels and then have a temporary tunnel, where would it be, on the northwest side or the southeast side?
Where would be the temporary tunnel?
Yeah.
On the east side.
So, here,
Correct.
okay.
I did. Has anybody ever thought about whitewashing the tunnels so they'll be brighter and not so dingy looking? I think of the Baltimore Chesapeake Tunnel down there. They have the subway tiles that are white. I mean, it looks and it reflects better. And I wonder if people would drive through better if it were lighter in there. And I just don't mean the electricity. I mean the sides, the top of the tunnel.
I'll ask my tunnel expert. Has that been proven, or is it just intuitive that something like that would help?
It's hard to say. I think perception is a valid point. So it's something that we can consider with our lighting folks. But from a structural perspective, it would not add anything. But we can take it into consideration.
Okay.
Well, that's not necessarily always good, right? You want to know what the problems might be behind.
Yes, sir. You're in the, behind you, I think, there's a gentleman.
What's the estimate cost of one project?
It depends on the option. I think for planning purposes, the most expensive option would be to bore a third bore for either temporary or permanent. We're talking about $200 million for that type of option.
The reason why I asked is because the traffic flow, now is quite a bit. It was 1950. Now, 30 years from now, you spend all this money, and then you have the same scenario all over again because who knows what the traffic flow is going to be 30 years from now. And you're going to spend all kinds of more money. Would it be realistic to do the 3 lanes, and then you'll have to spend money for another 60 years?
It could be, or it could be the other way where nobody is driving to work anymore. Everybody's, telecommuting, or, there's a lot of things that can happen. You're right. There has been an astronomical increase from 1950. It's like a 6-fold increase in traffic. Not sure if that would happen in the next 30 years, but you never know. But we would do any kind of traffic forecasting that would be required to make whatever option we had, make it be reasonable and take into account any kind of future traffic levels.
The reason being is so much money, and as you know, inflation, and as time goes on, it'll get bigger. And maybe that would be around, but realistically, the cost will be extremely more than we've had now.
Right, it's a lot of money, and there's a lot of variability when you have that kind of money. So, it's something we're going to have to look at closely.
Yeah, I have concerns about money too. Sounds like a big waste of money to me. Going through North Haven southbound, right near the rest area and exit 63, that can be bad often in the afternoons, and like nothing's done there. Like that gentleman said, you spend all this money through the tunnel, that could be very bad 10 years after it's complete. And you could do other things that cost virtually no money, like make a road similar to the Berlin Turnpike, or groove the road a little bit so traffic slows down. Spending billions on a tunnel, I believe, is ridiculous.
Okay, well, we appreciate your comment. Yes, sir.
As you know, I'm here basically representing the West River Watershed Coalition. And this entire project and all of the resources within it that you have so carefully pointed out are within the West River Greenway. So we're always concerned. Basically, everybody here is faced with the same problem. A road that was designed as a parkway has been taken over by economic trends, including the apparent right of all Americans to commute in private automobiles. And that has really caused the initial vision to fail to a considerable extent. What you're actually saying is we need to rehab this town somehow. Looking at the third tunnel option is the main thing that I wanted to talk about. I've done that with your team, and I was very appreciative of all of the comments and of your openness to discussing it. What I've noticed, and particularly in the last couple of weeks when I've gone to investigate the, I guess, east side, which would abut Wintergreen Brook, is that there are serious problems with that. I don't actually see how you could build a third tunnel there without taking some property from the nature center. I would hope that that would be minimal in any case. But there's a more serious problem, which is there would need to be a new bridge for this third tunnel over the existing Wintergreen Avenue and the brook. And it would be right at the point where the access to the nature center, the little access road, goes off from Wintergreen Avenue. And it would be right over the place where there is an existing bridge over the brook, and the brook itself makes a left turn. It's about a 90-degree turn. And it happens to be the most scenic part of that brook. It's quite significant. I can't see how you would deal with construction impacts. I can't see how you would deal with, in the long run, with water runoff, stormwater runoff from that third road. On the west side, I see a similar problem because in order to construct the run-up to a third tunnel on the south side, you'd need to fill the area which now serves as the place where runoff on that side of the road clearly accumulates. And that would be a lot of fill in a place where we really can't afford it. But our concern is with the impacts of water on the brook, primarily. So I think you know that, and I know we've talked before. I do have some additional pictures I will send on to your project people.
Okay. And your concerns are well justified, and we have looked at, either a temporary tunnel or a so-called permanent tunnel to the east. And we have looked at all those, alignment issues that you talk about, and maybe I'll have Mike just come up and discuss it a little bit. But yeah, on the surface, it looks like it's a big problem. But I think that when we did look at it, it may not be as bad as you think.
Thanks, Dave. In fact, the Department of Transportation is concerned about some of the things that you're presenting. In fact, one of the initiatives that the department did was institute this supplemental report. Remember we talked about, I said there was an original report that we did, that CDM Smith did in 2014. Well, the alignments that were discussed for that third tunnel, the department said, let's take a look at a temporary, and also when we look at a temporary tunnel, let's look at some different alignments that actually miss or minimize the impacts associated with that third tunnel alignment on the nature center. All right, we do realize the fact that there will be either a widening or a new bridge at Wintergreen Avenue to accommodate any third tunnel. To go over Wintergreen Avenue and also deal with the brook at that location. We realize the fact that, we would try to, we do everything we can to minimize the impacts to the brook and spanning over the brook. But what we're looking at is trying to adjust our alignment so that we would miss the nature center and also some of the locations on the western side as well. Dave? But Dave Seuss is going to talk about some of the environmental implications of both of these alternatives.
Thanks, Mike. Yes, that's a very good comment, a very good point, that we are concerned about the impacts. We are studying the resources. We haven't, as Mike mentioned, we haven't gotten to the point where we can understand what the alternatives are. But suffice it to say that protecting the resources is of the utmost concern to the Connecticut Department of Transportation. There's a need to protect, especially parkland. Parkland has a special status in state and federal legislation for protection, and the Nature Center has that similar status, as well as historical issues related to this portal on the north side of the parkway. So one of the examples that we could bring to the table at this point is that we will look at solutions that span longer distances than potentially the current bridge at Wintergreen, which would minimize the direct impacts to the brook itself and might avoid more property issues related to the Nature Center. So all those things require detailed analysis and analysis that requires survey. The surveys are underway, both of the topography and of the resources, namely the historical resources, the park resources, and the resources related to natural systems like wildlife and vegetation. So suffice it to say, all that will be studied in great detail. We'll also be studying the visual impact to people who live near the highway, people who are on the highway. So all of those concerns will be fleshed out in detail, and each alternative will be assessed against criteria that factors what those impacts may be. And I can't emphasize more that we prefer to avoid impacts. So avoidance is the best way to minimize impacts, because that's, that has no impact. The other concern and consideration that the DOT and the team will be looking at are the staging of construction, that we need to be concerned about where the work is staged from and whether we can minimize or avoid those impacts as well.
All right, gentleman in the yellow shirt. That's you, yes. I think it's yellow, maybe white, I don't know, lighting's bad.
In the traffic planning overview of this whole thing, has Route 15 been looked at in this location as its function as a circumferential route in the New Haven area? This New Haven area is extremely deficient in circumferential routes that connect the arterials that branch out from the city. And Route 15 actually crosses 34, 69, 67, Dixwell Avenue, Route 10, Whitney Avenue, Route 10, and those connections are very weak between those routes, where many cities have strong connections that connect the spokes of the wheels. So I think there's an unmet traffic demand here that it's always going to be pent up and ready to go. So when you think about the future, I think you should look at it in terms of that also.
Okay, Mike, have you looked at that in the as part of the traffic studies so far?
As far as that's concerned, no, we really haven't looked at the global implications of that. But that's something that will definitely be looked at in the NEPA-SEPA process, as far as looking at some of the overall impacts. But yeah, we'll be probably looking at that. But again, there's certain limitations as far as the limitations of this project and what we're trying to address. What we're trying to really do is address the issues as far as the tunnel is concerned, and replacement of the tunnel, as opposed to you know, what you're describing is a little bit more beyond the limits of what we're trying to do here, and that may have some implications of the Department of Transportation, you know, putting on some additional needs to what we're trying to address as far as you know, adding that. Again, it may be beyond the limits, beyond what we can actually do with this individual project.
Drilling of the tunnel. Any blasting anticipated with that? Any blasting?
Yeah, it is my thought that it would be constructed in pretty much the same way as the original tunnels were, albeit with much more modern technology. But I'll let Mahmood talk to that point a little bit.
Sure. So technology has advanced considerably since these tunnels were constructed, right? So my understanding is that these were done with drill and blast method. We now have machines which can excavate rock, but it depends on the quality of the rock. If the rock is very strong, then we would have to use drill and blast method. But if the rock is reasonably within the limits of these machines, which are called road headers, then we could look at using those machines to excavate the tunnels. So that's not something that we are able to determine at this point. After the geotechnical investigation that's completed, we get a better picture and we are able to better define the appropriate method of construction.
Point out real quick. And again, that was when we talked about, when we looked at the various alternatives, that was something that was actually looked at, the construction methods was looked at and addressed in the, at least preliminarily in the 2014 study, as far as the different types of construction methods, as Mahmood has pointed out. And again, some of that is going to be dependent on some of the studies we do, the geotechnical studies, on the existing type of rock that's out there and some of the properties of that rock.
Yes. One current problem at the West Fork Nature Center, as well as as well to residents that had their properties adjacent to the east side of the Merritt Parkway, is noise. Certain times of the day, it's very difficult to even hold a class at the Nature Center. So I was wondering if there will be any provisions to install sound barriers at the exit of the tunnel to mitigate the noise in that area.
Yeah, that hasn't been investigated as of yet.
What experience does the team have with actual tunnels? I'm guessing you guys have done tunnels somewhere else, or?
Yes, CDM Smith has been engaged in tunnel construction of various types, which includes hard rock as well as soft ground. In this case, it's likely to be mainly in rock, but the face of the tunnel, the portal areas, they are likely to be in soft ground because the rock line is lower than the crown of the tunnel. So CDM Smith does tunnels world over through. We were involved with the Goddard Base Tunnel, which is the longest tunnel in Europe. So we have extensive experience.
Yeah. Go back over this. Looking very briefly at the Wintergreen Bridge that 15 goes over, that bridge is currently spalling underneath and is in need of at least repair. So are you considering, if you are going to be doing the third tunnel, this would be something that would definitely need to be replaced at this point, and even within the planning purposes should be considered? Also, looking at that third tunnel, long-term impact should be temporary, going to what the gentleman said earlier about spokes and different transportation. if that tunnel was even to be made one way or very limited access, that could be a place where buses could go through from local access, even if it doesn't include 15. You could either use it as a recreation tunnel specifically for the nature center. It comes out close to the DOT on the other side. So you've got the nature center on one side, DOT on the other. You could actually bring it out near the DOT property, limits your need for right-of-way. You could use that as a bus tunnel, then now you could bring transportation from Hamden to Woodbridge and down to New Haven. Or you could use it as a walkway where people could long-term access both sides as something that maybe a regular resident who couldn't traverse the park itself could still walk and use that as transportation.
And we've heard that before, and yeah, we are looking. So your comment is, should we use a tunnel pretty much for stage construction, and then that tunnel would be used for other means after the mainline tunnel, so to speak, would be either widened or rehabilitated? What could you use that tunnel for? And I think that we've had a whole lot of suggestions on similar ways to utilize that sort of thing. So yeah, we appreciate your comment, and we have heard this before, and I'm sure it's not the last time I've heard of it, and we'll take a look at it.
Does a project of this size have to be passed by the state legislature?
Well, I'm assuming, depending on the amount of state funding involved, yes, there would be some action for the funds in the first place. Yeah, it's we have a certain amount of funds to use for projects, and it's up to the powers that be to decide how much money would go to which projects.
I have just one question concerning the drainage system for the design team. Have they looked at the present drainage system and considered what improvements they're going to make to it? It seems to me that it's handling many of the catch basins coming off of the Merritt Parkway, the Wilbercross Parkway, Route 15. It's also handling the water coming down from the bridge. There's a cutoff trench going into a basin that's caught up, and it's all being done into through an 18-inch pipe that dumps right into the West River. Now my question is, the tube or the barrel also collects water and drains in. Is that correct? I believe that I've seen that on some sketches. So that's taking that water that's collecting around the tube, and that's being drained in. It seems to me there's an awful lot of water being drained into the West River without any adequate filtration or retention basins or anything of that sort. Could Mike address that, if there's going to be something new added to the system that already exists?
Well, with any of the new, we really, as far as that's concerned, that's something that we'll definitely look at when we proceed with any of the preferred alternative. That's not something that will really affect the determination of that preferred alternative, but it would be something that that preferred alternative would have to address in the design. And obviously, any of the drainage of the new facilities would have to meet all the new requirements as far as, again, any making sure that meeting the needs of MS4 as far as property filtering that out before it actually gets introduced to a water area like West River. So that would be something that would be done in the preliminary and final design stages for whatever drainage systems we do have, making sure the fact that they pick up all that drainage and it gets properly treated before it gets dumped gets filtered into the rivers. We were out there with you again. Most likely, most likely it's not going to be a situation where we are not, that was a drainage system that was designed 60 years ago. So we would be looking at, obviously, upgrades, and those upgrades would have to be, address the new requirements for those kind of systems. They would be reviewed, and again, that would be something that they'd have to be sized adequately, and they would have to have the proper, and again, if it was a situation where some kind of a hydraulic separator or something like that would be installed, or simply a drainage basin, something along those lines, I don't see that would be too much of an issue. Again, obviously, would be in the final design stages, though. We wouldn't be getting that far in the weeds right now. Any alternative we would be designing would have to address those and upgrade those accordingly. Thank you.
Anybody else? Clarification point. You said with the protected shell that would essentially become a single lane, or would there still be 2 lanes of traffic in that?
3 lanes.
Yeah, the size of when we looked at the various systems that have been used before, what would happen is if you had a protective shield, all right, because of the already very limited width out there, you definitely could only get 1 lane of traffic. Plus the fact that when you actually introduce that, it does start to restrict the ability to actually operate above it and around it, which also increases the cost. And really, that's one of the things that we looked at, whether the feasibility and the practicality of it was somewhat limited, but the impacts to traffic, because it does put it down to a single lane of traffic. So you have this very complicated system or construction method that hasn't been used very much in the United States, that is limited practicality but has huge traffic impacts. It's one of the reasons why we looked at it, but whether or not it's a viable solution is somewhat doubtful.
Okay. If that's it, I thank you for attending. Just want to remind you that, again, our new website is up and running. It's the heroestunnelproject.com. Also, you can go to the state DOT website, ct.gov/DOT. Within a short amount of time, I would say within a week or so, we should have the actual PowerPoint presentation posted online if you'd like to see it again, or if you know anybody else that wasn't able to make it here tonight, they could check it out through our website. So thank you again, and have a good night.